Feel like you're blind to what's happening in your operation? Well, Surgair is here to give you the visibility you need to get your operation under control. Their singular focus is building AI-powered, frictionless supply chains that give you real-time, end-to-end visibility. Surgair utilizes IoT solutions with their SaaS platform, Interius. That gives you 99.9% data accuracy and better control of your operations. Get the visibility you need at surgair.com. That's SURGERE.com, and find them at Manifest in booth 527. Visibility, control, results, Surgair.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Anthony Jules, and he is the co-founder and CEO over at Robust AI. And Robust AI is focused on bringing robotic and automation solutions to the manufacturing and warehouse space, and recently unveiled their Carter, which is a new take on a picking cart, which is very cool, and we're going to dive into that a little bit, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the idea of collaborative robotics and what that truly means and how to truly accomplish that. And we'll dive a little bit into Anthony's background too. He's been in the robotics world for quite some time, and learn a little bit about that journey to founding Robust AI as well. So Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate you having me on.
Definitely happy to get you on. Excited to talk to you and learn more about what you've been up to here. And Carter definitely is a very cool solution that I've seen come to the market recently, and very interested to dive further into that as well. But before we get to that, why don't you kind of kick it off for us here? Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ultimately came to found this company, Robust AI.
Well, happy to. I think, unfortunately, I have to start the story really far in the past, and that's for two reasons. One is I'm getting terribly old, but the other reason is I actually met my co-founder almost 30 years ago at MIT. I was a student studying robotics and AI, and my co-founder, Rodney Brooks, was at that point head of the AI lab at MIT. You know, he went on to be founder of iRobot, and I went on to be part of the founding team of a company called Sapient Corporation, and was there for about 10 years, helped take that company public, grew it from 3 people when I started to almost 4,000 by the time I left.
Wow.
And had a phenomenal experience in what it means to really build a hyper-growth business. And came back to robotics about 15 years ago after doing video games and giant enterprise systems, and felt like we were just at the point where we were starting to get sensing modalities that could really make robots useful. Hardware was getting cheaper and cheaper to build, which has continued really over the last decade and a half. And even at that point, some of what we were able to do with AI pointed out that it was this watershed moment. And now that story has repeated itself 3 times during just this last decade and a half. And really what drove this company is, most recently, I was part of the founding team of Redwood Robotics that got bought by Google.
Mm-hmm.
So ended up making robots at Google for 4 years that you don't get to show people that much of. But it made it really clear to me what I wanted to build next, because what I saw as now being possible with modern AI meant that we could really build high capability systems that were affordable but had all of the capabilities that you need to provide the ROI for customers, for what I was hearing. A lot of robotics is driven by passion, but, because of my background and because of, what I've been successful at, I always focus on what provides value to a customer. And then if you find that, then you can build a thing that solves that problem. And that's a place that I can then pour passion into. And that's always, how I've always looked at businesses, and certainly how I'm looking at this one. And the great news is Rodney, who's my CTO, Rodney Brooks, my co-founder, he and I have known each other and wanted to work together for the better part of 30 years, as I mentioned. He has funny jokes where he's tried to hire me before and I said no. And he always gives me a hard time. But finally, when I told him some of the things I'd been thinking about, it was an incredible coincidence that he'd been having a lot of the same ideas. And that's really what drove the genesis for this company.
Interesting. I love that. And I think it's fantastic that, after 30 years, you could finally find some time to work together and really kind of align and find those synergies. And I think, seeing that, and it's interesting too, you said something there in your background I want to touch on a little later as we talk a little bit about the solution you guys have put in the market. But it's super interesting to hear about your experiences and what you've been able to do. And now, like you mentioned, coming back into robotics and seeing that there's more capabilities out there that maybe you can accomplish some of the things that you were thinking about in terms of solutions. So that kind of leads us to the mission, I think, a little bit of Robust AI, which I thought was pretty interesting from your website. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the mission of Robust AI and what you're really trying to kind of accomplish for the warehouse space?
Yeah, so Kevin, I guess I'll step back a minute and say that we're at an incredibly important moment in time right now. Generative AI and other types of AI are exploding on the scenes. We have a ton of different morphologies, including humanoids, getting more and more attention and money, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And this is the moment when we get to define what the relationship is between people and robots that are going to operate in the same space as people. What we're drawing from is science fiction and fantasy novels, but this is the moment in history when this actually gets defined. So our mission is really combining AI, robotics, and human-centered design to make robots work for people. And that's really, it seems like, from our perspective, it seems like the obvious way to tackle this problem, but it's inverting how most people are coming at this question. We think you need to start with the experience that people are going to have and design that and build that so that people you build something that's useful.
Yeah.
You build something that's effortless to adopt or easy, essentially zero friction to adopt. And it has to be delightful for people to use. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting this uphill battle for adoption and acceptance. Whereas we think if you design with humans in mind from the beginning, you actually get some momentum behind you and you become a thing that improves people's experience and something that they are excited to use and promote. And that's really, kind of our perspective, which is combining good design of systems that people use, and this is informed by stuff Rodney has done, stuff, some of my other leadership team members have done, like Leila Takayama. And I spent almost 10 years in the video game industry, watching people vote with their thumbs. And when you get human behavior behind the product that you're building, that's when magical things happen. So our mission is really combining the AI and robotics with human-centered design to build something that puts people in the right place in that relationship, which is having agency over these large systems and having a delightful experience when using them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you use it there twice now, that adjective delightful for the work experience. And I think that's such a great thing to think about and to try and go after, because it's a lot of times it's like, well, we just need to make it tolerable, right, for the employee to be able to do their job. But making it delightful, and like you said, creating this experience that's exciting for them to come and work and interact with these solutions, I think is a great approach to do that. And I think it's also a great approach not only for just getting excitement around it, but also covering multiple generations in the workforce too as well, because it's it's one thing that there's a question often of like, how do we get the younger generation excited to do some of these jobs, right, that can be pretty manual sometimes, right? But how do we bring in something exciting for them to do, which could be robotics or AI in some way, or it's all about kind of the user experience. But then the older generation too, how do you make them feel comfortable with these machines essentially coming in and helping them to do their jobs, make it easier for them, but then also have them a little more accepting too of what's happening, right? Instead of that kind of skepticism, maybe fear of job replacement in a sense. So you guys are really focused on kind of not only that collaborative approach, it sounds like, but also that user experience as well. So I wanted to touch on that. That's what I wanted to come back to. Actually, you mentioned the video game experience there. So, how does that, as you've looked at this kind of problem in the market and the approach you're taking to it, what you just told us about, how does kind of that user experience, the way that people interact with video games, for example, as you mentioned, I mean, how does that kind of influence the development of your solution, and how does that really help you to be able to make a more collaborative robot and collaborative solution that is human focused and centered?
Yeah, so I think, Kevin, you just asked the million-dollar question there. This is the first time we can have machines that truly work with people. So our robot is what's referred to as an AMR, an autonomous mobile robot.
Right.
It drives around in facilities, and you can use it to move materials around, whether it's orders or larger quantities. Historically, when those have been referred to as collaborative, it just means that they can be in the same space as people and they can safely navigate without hitting people. That's very akin to what's called parallel play. If you look at child development, that's when like 1.5-year-olds or 2-year-olds sit next to each other, but they don't really share the toys. They're just in the same space. Yeah. As you look at how we develop and how we evolve, the next steps of collaboration really are about doing the same task with multiple people. And that's what we've built and where we're going. And we're just, I think the entire world's just at the beginning of that journey. So we're defining a new frontier, and it's really about robots doing tasks where they're sharing initiative. They're taking turns. So for example, in a very straightforward workflow for us, where a robot and a person are doing a picking operation together. The person's doing some of the manipulation and grabbing things and putting it on the robot. The robots are moving things between people or between locations. So they're splitting the task. But part of how we make it even more collaborative is we have built features into the robot that help people know what to do when. It seems like a simple thing, and it is in some ways a simple thing, but the software behind it is fairly complex. But we have programmable strips of LEDs on every shelf on the robot and kind of in various other places, so that if someone needs to put something in a tote on a robot, we know where that tote is, and we can light up the LEDs just in front of that one tote to tell a person where the next action that they're going to be, to show a person where that is. It seems like a small thing, but just that thing trims off 3 to 5 seconds, just that one action. And that's important, of course, from an ROI standpoint. If you're doing 20 million picks a year in a facility, add up the time,
that's a lot.
5 seconds matters.
Yeah.
However, the other thing that it does is it allows a person to use multiple modalities and essentially subconsciously know where that next action is going to be. They're not reading, location numbers. They're not looking up a location number. They're just seeing this thing light up and they know exactly what tote they need to address next. And whether it's putting something in a tote, taking something out, what it does is it actually helps people kind of drop into a flow state much more readily. And then again, the experience of doing the job becomes a more positive one because the person's now able to move much more smoothly, much more quickly. They're just getting more done. And the interesting thing is there's plenty of research around this, including research that we've done in warehouses doing picking. When you get people to get to just the right level of moving quickly enough, but not feeling rushed, but you feel that sense of competence, you get into a state of what's called flow. And the experience that people have is incredibly positive. You also get effects like time seems to disappear, but you get a huge sense of satisfaction. Yeah. And that's really what this whole collaborative robotics approach is about. It's finding this win-win where you can have a place where people doing the job have a better experience of it. They're more productive doing it. And therefore, the facility is actually getting better numbers while you're doing it. So it's this really exciting win-win, and that's what we designed for.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Where do supply chain solutions come together? At ProMat 2025 in Chicago. With over 1,100 of the world's leading manufacturing and supply chain solution providers under one roof, ProMat 2025 puts you face-to-face with the people, technologies, and game-changing ideas that are shaping this industry's future. From seeing the latest in our industry to learning from some of the brightest in our industry, there is something for everyone at ProMat. Will we see you in Chicago, March 17th to the 20th? Learn more at promatshow.com. And be sure to check us, the new warehouse, out at booth E10643. That's E10643. Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's a great point there too. And that idea of getting people to reach that point of flow, as you said, more often and more consistently too, I think is a huge factor. And I think you see that. I mean, as former warehouse manager, I would see where there was a disruption in the picking process or something. And, the employees get frustrated because now they're like thrown off and you see productivity slip a little bit and things like that. So, that flow is such a critical point. And I think it's great that you're focused on trying to enable that more consistently and in a better way too. And, I love the idea. I saw the video of Carter is what the AMR is called. I saw the video of Carter put to light in the bins there. I think, makes a lot of sense as well. And like you said, that 3 to 5 seconds, is huge. 3 seconds seems in one pick, like 3 seconds. But then when you said you get to 20 million, that's a huge deal, right? Even you get to a couple thousand picks and tens of thousands of picks, it's a huge deal as well. So, that savings is really big. And I think, the one thing about, Carter to me that stands out the most as I see the videos of it there and, is the fact that it's autonomous, right? It's coming to location, going to location, but then there's also this collaborative aspect, which I don't think I've seen before, where now it can also manually be engaged and moved by the operator to put it in a better position or to navigate it to exactly where they want it to be. So tell us a little bit about how that works and kind of where the idea of being able to do that is. Because I think a lot of the solutions I see out there, it's more focused on being like hands off in the sense like the operator doesn't need to move anything. And I think in this scenario, they don't have to move anything, but they have the option to, which I haven't really seen before. I've seen it on like some forklift type AMRs, but not necessarily like a cart type. So tell us a little bit about the decision to include that feature and how does that work?
Yeah, so this comes back to what I was mentioning before and what you were sharing your experiences as a warehouse manager.
Sure.
We did a ton of research early in the company. And one of the things we did was a thing called a diary study across, over 100 people, from shift supervisors, floor associates, kind of, a diagonal slice. And there are a few really durable findings from that. One of them was the definition of a good day was pretty consistent, and it wasn't a day with more coffee breaks. It was literally a day where I got my work done, didn't get interrupted, and felt a huge sense of satisfaction. Like as you go through it across the board, that's actually what people want to feel at the end of the day. So armed with that, we started designing more and more what could possible solutions be. We had some ideas for different pieces of this, but that idea of making sure that people can stay on task and stay engaged was one of our highest design goals. So when you look at robots being deployed in spaces with people, one of the biggest complaints that you hear, and this is in warehouses, it's in manufacturing, it's in hospitals, all these places where collaborative robots have been deployed. The biggest gripes that you hear are, I wanted to do X, but I couldn't, and the robot was in my way. Something happened with the robot and it wasn't functioning. We just needed to get past it and we couldn't do that. We needed to make a change to the flow at the last minute. And, the manufacturing engineer or whoever the person in charge of conducting the robots wasn't accessible to go onto their special computer and make sure none of the robots came down the aisle with the forklift. Yeah. And that caused delays. But when you distill all of this stuff down, it came down to people needed agency over these machines and they could not get it. So again, we're all design nerds and, design AI and robotics nerds. So the question we then end up asking ourselves is, well, what would happen if you give people agency and what would that look like? And then you start pressing on that, and we came up with an idea for giving people agency and doing it in a way that felt incredibly natural and essentially didn't require training and you could do subconsciously. One of the things I think we've all learned from phones and tablets over the last 15 plus years is touch drops below our conscious level and is a really effortless way to convey intention. You don't think about where you're moving your finger on your phone screen. Yeah. You just think about what app you're opening, which email you're sending, what your message needs to be. So combining all of those things, through many, many iterations and conversations, we got to this idea of, well, what if a person could literally just grab the robot or grab some affordance on the robot to push it if they need it, or move it out of the way, or tell it to do something different than it's doing? Does that get to the space in the design that we're trying to get to? And once we got there, we just got more and more excited because it satisfied all of our initial goals of giving people agency, making sure that the job never gets interrupted. But then it opened up a bunch of other things like workflows that you can't do any other way than someone pushing, a cart or a robot. Now we have an autonomous thing that you can control from this giant computer in the cloud, but you can also control from a person literally pushing it to the location that they want, or essentially using it like a mouse in the real world, which is going to a location, pressing a button and saying, hey, this is where packing station number 57 is. So now that's a new location that these things can navigate to. And you can actually teach them by driving the robot there and telling them, this is an important location to remember. So a whole bunch of stuff started opening up once we created that affordance of giving people this crazy new way of collaborating, which is at any point, you can just grab the robot and move it.
Yeah, I think that's so cool because it's like you said. I mean, you see this disruption or something, and the robot doesn't work, and now you gotta call the person that's the specialized. They have the knowledge to troubleshoot and things like that, and it is that disruption like you talked about. And I see in the videos you guys have. I mean, it seems very simple. I mean, is it as easy as like because the robot is, essentially a pick cart, right? That's automated. It has different kind of wheels on it, so it can move in multiple different kind of directions. And it comes to you, and then it has a handle on it, just like a pick cart. And from what I see, it looks like you just start to push it, and it just goes. Is it that easy, or is it you have to like switch something on? I mean, it seems super, super simple.
Yes, it is that easy.
Okay.
And I'm going to dive into, because I'm an engineer, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about
Sure.
some of the subtleties there, but it is fundamentally that easy. So in the most basic mode, it is a powered cart that at any point a person can grab anywhere on the cart and push it.
Mm.
And in that mode, it just feels like a slightly heavy cart. It will let you push it holding anywhere on it.
Mm.
And it just feels like a slightly weighed down cart. As you mentioned, there's also a handlebar on it, which we love doing them in kind of this bright orange now, which tells people, grab here.
Yeah.
When you grab that handle, you can then move it as if it's almost weightless. And what this means is whether it's a heavily laden cart with 100 kilos or something more on it, you can still move it effortlessly with one hand. And that handle amplifies any action that you exert. And it adds one more mode, which is if you twist the handle, that acts like a steering wheel and makes this giant, 6 foot tall robot with 100 kilos or more on it turn quite effortlessly. And one of the things that we love doing is seeing people's face the first time they do it.
Yeah.
Because we've had people say it's kind of like an Iron Man suit. It makes you feel incredibly powerful because you can move this big thing with really, really small amount of effort. And the goal is to empower people in that way so that whenever they do need to take over or do an override or manually take agency over the robot, it's I'll come back to that word we used before. It's delightful.
Mm.
So it's not just, oh, the robot's in my way. It's the robot's in my way, but that's just not a big deal. The example that I sometimes think about is how many times we move chairs during the course of the day. Most people, you never think about this. You move a chair every time you sit in it, every time you get out of it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that just drops below our radar. My goal is to make interaction with Carter feel that way.
Mm.
You don't think about, oh, I had to grab Carter to do X. No, I went past it. I needed to, block off an aisle because we were doing some work with a high lift, a high reach truck. Who cares why?
Yeah.
You just think of it as one of your tools. You just put it where you need it to be, and the right thing happens.
Mm.
And quite bluntly, I think that's the relationship we should have with all robots that share space with humans. Like, it's the same relationship that people have with all objects that share space with us. You want something to be in a different place, you pick the box up and you move it. That's our expectation as people. And we think that doesn't need to change necessarily with robots.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's great. And I love the analogy to the chair in a sense, right? Like, I mean, you're very right. I mean, you sit down at your desk, you're in the chair, you're kind of unaware that you're moving, right? I mean, even sometimes when you're thinking, you catch yourself, and you're like, oh, I've just been like swiveling around for 20 minutes or something. So it is like very, just like you're subconsciously doing it, I guess, but you're not necessarily feeling it. I love that that's kind of your goal, to be able to get to that point and that level of interaction with the robot where it's just almost like just an extension of you in a sense, and what you're trying to accomplish. And I love too that you mentioned that it's essentially kind of feels very light in comparison to how much it's actually weighing when you go to move it manually. And I think that's a great thing. So very interesting, application there and solution that you put together. And now Carter's recently come out, but you guys are in a relationship with DHL supply chain and they're leveraging it. So tell us a little bit about that relationship and how they're utilizing it and what kind of, results are you seeing from that?
Yeah. So as a small startup, it's it's an incredible honor for us to be working with DHL.
Yeah.
So DHL Supply Chain is the number one 3PL in the world. So we're working with them across 2 regions already. And that was a surprise to us. We started off working with them in North America, and we have another region that we'll be announcing probably early next year.
Okay.
But we are, we've been working with them, I'd say even in some ways as a design partner for the last 2 years. And they've been helping us understand the space, understand trade-offs, really hone parts of the experience for floor associates to kind of bring to fruition all of these ideas that I shared earlier. But of course, doing all of that in the context of providing the best possible ROI for them. What our early results look like is we've been able to significantly increase productivity in the facilities that we've worked with them. Typically what we look for and what we're seeing, I'll start off by saying DHL is not just the number one in size, they're also the number one in operational efficiency.
Yeah.
So I'll be blunt. The average DHL facility is already typically at UPH levels that other people might find hard to hit.
Yeah.
So in some facilities where we would get a 3x increase in productivity at DHL, that would be a bit reduced. But what we're looking at is 50, 60, 70% increase in productivities in these facilities that are already pretty highly optimized. And of course, that's incredibly exciting for us and for DHL.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great too. I mean, kudos to you guys for being able to cultivate and develop that relationship there. Obviously, getting that start and help around design and everything as you've been developing this to rolling it out, with one of the top, if not the top 3PL out there, as you mentioned, is a great thing. And still to be able to see those gains on an organization that's, like as you said, traditionally very optimized already to begin with, I think is also a big win there. So definitely very interesting, and be interested to see how that continues to develop. And speaking of DHL, right, we know that we have Manifest and ProMat coming up, DHL being one of the big sponsors of Manifest as well, and you guys will also be at Manifest and ProMat. And I'm sure people, if they're listening, as you mentioned, there are very eager to test and push this cart around, Carter, that is, the cart, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, what can people expect if they're coming to Manifest or ProMat? What can they expect to see from you guys?
Yeah, so we're excited because we'll, of course, have a presence at both of those shows. We'll have a booth at both, and we'll have live carters available for people to try out in multiple modes. What I expect is we'll allow people to do the handlebar mode, which we just did when we launched it at another show that we were at. In addition, we're gonna debut a new feature, which I won't share. I won't say what it is yet, but you'll actually get to see. Yeah, you'll get to see carters actually doing a tiny pick tour within the booth that we're in, and featuring some new user experience features that make picking even a bit faster. And again, with that goal of keeping people in flow, keeping people moving, and making facilities even more productive. We're pretty excited that, we'll have, depending on the show, 2 to 3 carters moving around autonomously and available for people to experience the collaborative features and the handlebar takeover, just being able to grab a robot and move it. And I can't overstate the experience that people have. Every once in a while you get to work on a product that makes people smile. And it's really rewarding and fun for me at these shows when I see people try the handlebar for the first time and literally sometimes giggle. And that's especially rewarding when, it's not the people you expect, it's, a veteran executive who, semi-retired, only on boards now, and comes over and he's asking about it, and then he grabs it, it moves, and you see his eyes open up. And yeah, looking forward to sharing that experience with as many people at the show as we can.
Awesome, and definitely looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to testing it myself too as well, which we'll be sure to do over there at both Manifest and ProMat. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you there, and very great to learn from you here, what you guys are accomplishing here in the space and bringing to the warehousing industry with Carter, and bringing that real collaborative approach with such a human-minded, focused approach to it. I think is really a great thing to hear for the worker perspective on the floor there, who's going to be interacting with this type of solution. I think that's such a great thing. And, it's been a great experience to talk to you. I'll say the conversation has been delightful, I will say, for sure, Anthony here. So really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. If people are interested in learning more about Robust AI, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do that is we are just robust.ai as our website. And then also feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. That's my main social. And I'm just Anthony Jules. That's my name on LinkedIn.
All right, awesome. And we'll definitely put links to all of that at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here too. So Anthony, really appreciate your time on the show today.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.